Our next speaker is Elizabeth Marston. She's a hacker, a philosopher, and an activist with a fire for connecting the future of technology with the future of social justice. Please welcome Elizabeth. Do you need this?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I do.
There you go.
Thank you kindly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah. Forward's the other way, I think.
This was forward.
I think so.
Wait,
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Hello, everyone. I think it's kind of serendipitous that I come right after the previous speaker because I'm actually interested in radicalizing you. So I hope to see some drop in your cognition by the end of the evening or afternoon. So my background is in both IT and in activism. And more importantly than anything that happens here in this room today, you're helping me settle a 2-year-old dinner argument I had with my sister. And that's the most important thing we're going to get out of today. I'm joking, but okay. So I'll let you know when to laugh. So my sister and I, my sister's also an activist, also has a similar education in some respects, and is in the Bay Area. And she and I had a big disagreement over the relationship between activism and technology companies and the tech sector in general. And my sister, who takes part in actions, protesting rising housing costs due to Google and things like that, and transit issues, she says that activism and tech are in tension with each other. These are two separate phenomenons. There's the rise of kind of things like Black Lives Matter, like Occupy. This is a completely separate phenomenon than the tech industry. And as she says, this is because they have completely different people, tools, goals, and values. And I told her, of course, that she's wrong. My claims, contra my sister, are that contemporary activism, of course, like everything else in our world, is an application of technology, and that contemporary activist organizations now, of course, use the same tool chain and stack that contemporary companies do. Duh. Therefore, 1, the tech industry supplies, trains, and subsidizes a huge tranche of the activism happening today, both left and right. 2, activists and startups often face the same problems and address them with the same set of tools. So this is kind of a big deal. Like we're talking about 2 groups of people working on the same problem that don't talk to each other. That's kind of, that's kind of weird, right? And 3, technologists, who I will concede to my sister, are often very different folks than your typical activist. Technologists can learn from activists because activists sometimes get there first, which would be unsurprising, right? Technologists get there first and a lot of other times. So, and finally, a promissory note, there'll be an important prediction at the end of this talk, and it will be correct. You can laugh. Okay, so my first claim is that modern politics is a technology product. And because I'm a big fan of a new Portman neologism, that was also a joke, I'm calling it Politech. And so, just fun to fling around new terms. Okay, so Politech is this new thing that's happened. And I think this is flowing out very directly from the way that modern technology and modern technological brands have to engage with communities, which is what, the bread and butter of activism, right? Okay, so just to kind of motivate my point here, I'm going to take you on a very, very lightning quick tour of the last dozen bizarre years, because things have gotten weird, right? Like, how many people think things have gotten weird? Right? Okay, how did we get here, right? This feels kind of normal, but it's not, right? So how did this start? So in 2004, my then brand new copy of and I was in Chicago in 2004, my then brand new copy of the Midwest Academy Manual for Activists recommended, quote, reaching out to local churches and unions to build a movement. And today this advice is about as quaint as it sounds. It doesn't really get you very far. That book, in fact, was obsolete the day it was published because the anti-war movement of the Bush era was one of the first, actually, to be really heavily leverage the internet and be organized flat. So up until the early 2000s, when you were organizing, you went to unions, you went to churches, because they were top-down orgs, they had the numbers, they could get boots on the ground. These days, you don't do that, and the first people that actually, in modern era, that did that from completely grassroots was, I would say, the anti-war movement. Then in 2008, of course, Obama won this election, again, with this massive grassroots apparatus. Another alum of Chicago, he had an activist scene in Chicago. He had a vast network of activists that he tapped into and motivated his campaign. Shortly after that, there was the famous Stuxnet attack on Iranian centrifuges. And so this is actually, geopolitics, not so much activism, but it is an idea of kind of like what the state of the world was. Like that, someone made a computer virus to take out Iran. Like that's, it's kind of a, momentous thing. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Occupy in 2011 happened. And it was, of course, the first hashtag movement. Shortly thereafter, Tahrir Square happened, and the Arab Spring occurred, which, of course, also relied heavily on Twitter. So you can start to see this sort of phasing in of this new reality here. In 2013, activists discovered that the U.S. government was also concerned about their activism. So we all discovered, thanks to Edward Snowden, that there's massive scale surveillance, probably using both big data and machine learning. And then, of course, we had, more recently, the Black Lives Matter movement that, of course, I think it is sort of this beautiful, beautiful form of organization because it did kind of spring entirely from a hashtag, right? So, Occupy was kind of something promoted by, Adbusters magazine. So Occupy came out of that, but was more grassroots. But BLM actually started as this hashtag and then got going. It was pretty neat stuff. So meanwhile, of course, though, on the other side, the alt-right was also doing this, and now you have the president of the USA having been kind of basically put in office by a bunch of My Little Pony bronies on 4chan trading memes of a frog. I'm sorry, this is the real timeline. I'm really sorry about this, guys. And with a big, heavy assist from some Cambridge Analytica, of course, and Facebook and Twitter, and probably the Russians. So, in conclusion, just summarizing the last 12 years in a thumbnail, left and right are in an arms race, and the arms dealer to both sides happens to be the tech sector. Second claim, and by the way, this goes back a ways, right? This isn't just some accident that happened because there's some nice tools made. This is a shared value, I claim, between technologists and activists. And the shared value is disruption, that word we're all sick of. It's a cliche, like synergy or anything else. But it's there, and cliches always have a kernel of truth to them and become cliches because there's value. This, as you can probably, who recognizes this lady? Yeah, old timers like me, right? So this lady is from the 1984 commercial for the first Macintosh, Apple Mac. So, and it was modeled after an Orwellian, the novel 1984, right? So, which had a movie associated with it. 1984, the novel, right? Just trying to get a cultural feel for okay, good. Okay, so I don't know. I talk to lots of folks. I always make the wrong assumptions. It's like, okay. But anyway, so yeah, so this value goes back a ways, and people were already using this imagery, this kind of this connection between these two things in marketing for tech stuff like years ago, more than 20 years ago. Okay, so but jumping back to the modern era. I believe, and I apologize, the fonts look much better on my unit than they do up here. This is like Times New Roman. That's not how I normally roll, just FYI. It's an important activist principle. You stay away from Times New Roman and you stay away from Comic Sans. Anything else is permitted, even Arial, but well, yeah. Okay, anyway, so this is the tool set that actually, I think, drives most startups and also most activists now, most activist organizations. And it has unique properties that I'll discuss in a minute, but because I love a good neologism, I've come up with COSMEC as the acronym, and it is crowdsourcing, open source, social media, mobile, encryption, and cloud. And basically, again, there's a font issue here. This looks much better on mine. I'm sorry, it's my fault. I didn't send a proper PowerPoint. I just sent Google Slides over. So I apologize for the text spilling out illegibly below the box here. But anyway, so this is what folks are using, and again, it's completely standard, right? Like everyone knows these tools. These are the sort of that's how you get things done. But what's the cultural impact of these technologies together? So what do these technologies do? How do they change the world? Well, first of all, they make infrastructure temporary and disposable. Are some of you familiar with the cattle not pets adage from DevOps? The idea being that you should never have pets, you should never have servers that are precious, you should always have cattle, like disposable infrastructure. That's also taken place. That's revolutionized everything for activists as well. It means that you can move really quickly. You can set up temporary autonomy, temporary autonomous zones. It means that the real backing store of value becomes not your sunk costs, but your networks, your communities, and your people, right? So it radically empowers community over capital. It reduces barrier to entry. And creates an opportunity for temporary autonomy for organizations to just appear like swarms and disappear just as quickly. And of course, it makes InfoSec like this incredibly pivotal component that no one seems to get right, least of all Hillary's emails. Anyway, that's kind of the core of it. So basically, that's basically how things have shaken out thanks to Cosmic. So my next claim, my third claim, and my final claim is that activism innovates. And this, I think, to me, this is self-evident. So it's sort of harder for me to argue from. But I would say that most of the really good startup skills that I've procured in my career have actually most come from activist spaces, because there you have a highly motivated, very intelligent group of people that really believe and have a core value that they're moving towards regardless of profitability, which I think tends to lead to good outcomes. My next claim is actually very quickly that one of the reasons why this might seem like a surprising idea that we'd turn, as technologists, we'd turn to activists to find out how to do things, is that while activists have spent a lot of time kind of poaching skills from, and sort of ideas from the tech sector, and often code bases, because we're all up on that open source. The reverse has not yet been true, and I think largely that's just because of cultural reasons. I think that there's been a large sort of disconnect between capitalists and anti-capitalists, and I think that distinction needs to break down as we move towards a kind of a post-capitalist society where half the population doesn't have employment. So that's, I think, a big area where businesses today, in 2017, can find alpha, can find unexplored ideas and avenues for growth and development, and possibly get a leg up. So if you want, I'm going to end with a prediction. My prediction is that just as we've had mindfulness kind of thing happen in startup spaces, we've had movements that have had the brain hacking thing go down. I believe that in the next 10 years, studying and working with activists will be the next big business craze. So you can, and for good reason, because it will actually provide benefit. So I predict that I invite you actually to get radicalized and stay away from people analyzing your rhetoric. But to get radicalized, get out there, get involved. And if you're a CEO already pulling 80 hours a week and you cannot, hire someone who did. Hire someone who does. Because those kids are going to have skills that you don't, and they're going to have kind of on-the-ground boots training that is going to be exactly what you need, and they're going to have it on the tools that you're using. And that's my talk.